At the very end of this story, when the truth finally comes out and the whole town stands silent under the burning summer sky, you'll understand why hardened rancher risked everything: his land, his name, even his freedom, for a 13-year-old girl who whispered through trembling lips, "I'm too young to be a wife." And when you learn what he had secretly done for her all those years, you may find yourself asking a question you never expected. How far would you go to protect a child who isn't your own? Stay with this story until the end, because what seems like a simple rescue becomes something far greater than anyone in that small prairie town could have imagined. The wind rolled across the plains like an untold warning. Dust lifted from the dry earth and drifted toward the wooden house where 13-year-old Eliza stood frozen on the porch. The sky stretched wide and endless above her, but she had never felt smaller. Behind her, through the thin door, she could hear the low murmur of men's voices. Her father's voice was firm, decided. The rancher's voice was steady, quiet. Eliza clutched the hem of her faded blue dress. Her knuckles were pale. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She had heard enough to understand. Debt, a drought, a bargain, and her name spoken like livestock. Stastak. When the door creaked open, her father stepped out first. His shoulders were heavy with pride swallowed too many times. "Eliza," he said, avoiding her eyes, "a Mr. Caleb Warren has agreed to help us." She looked past him at the tall man standing in the doorway. Caleb Warren, the wealthiest rancher for 50 miles, broad-shouldered, weathered by sun and silence, a widower with no children, a man known for speaking little but meaning every word. Eliza's throat tightened. "Help us how?" she whispered. Her father inhaled sharply. "You'll go with him." The world tilted. "I'm too young to be a wife," she said, her voice breaking before she could stop it. The words fell into the wind and seemed to vanish. Her father's jaw tightened. "This is how it's done. He'll provide for you. You'll have food." "Security, a roof that doesn't leak." "You don't want security," she cried softly. "I want school. I want school. I want—" Her father's hand trembled, but his voice hardened. "We don't always get what we want." Caleb stepped forward then. His eyes met hers for the first time, and something passed between them. Not ownership, not desire, not triumph. Triumph. Something else. Pain. The ride to Caleb's ranch was silent. The wagon creaked. The horse's hooves thudded against dry earth. Eliza stared ahead, refusing to cry. She would not let either of them see her break. Caleb didn't try to speak to her. But once, only once, she saw him glance at her small hands gripping the edge of the wagon seat. His jaw tightened. When they reached the ranch, the sun was dipping low, setting the fields aflame with orange light. The house was large but plain, a porch wrapped around the front. A barn stood sturdy in the distance. Cattle grazed quietly. It looked peaceful, too peaceful for what she believed her life had become. Inside, Caleb set down her small cloth bag. "There's a room upstairs," he said simply. "Second door on the left." She didn't move, and the left, she didn't move. "You don't have to be afraid here," he added. She let out a hollow laugh. "I'm 13. The words hung between them. Caleb's voice dropped. "I know." That night, Eliza sat on the edge of the bed in the small upstairs room. The mattress was soft. The sheets were clean. Too clean. Too clean. She felt like an intruder in her own life. Downstairs, she could hear Caleb moving about the kitchen. A chair scraping. A kettle placed on the stove. No footsteps on the stairs. No knock at her door. No claim. She didn't sleep. She waited. But morning came quietly, and nothing had changed. Over the next few days, something strange happened. Caleb treated her not like a wife, but like a guest. Breakfast was placed on the table before she came down. He worked the fields from dawn to dusk. He never entered her room. He never spoke of marriage. He never mentioned a ceremony. When neighbors stopped by, he introduced her carefully. "This is Eliza. She's staying here." "Not my wife." "Staying." The word echoed in her mind. One afternoon, she gathered enough courage to ask, "When is the wedding?" Caleb didn't look at her right away. There isn't one," he said finally. She blinked. "But my father—" "Your father needed money," Caleb replied. "I gave it to him." Her breath caught. "In return," he continued, "you were to come here." Her stomach twisted. He finally looked at her fully. "But no one said anything about you being harmed." The word hit her like a lifeline. "Paxum." And she whispered, "You're a child," he said firmly, "and you'll stay one." Tears sprang to her eyes before she could stop them. "And why?" she asked. Caleb looked past her, out toward the wide open land. "Because sometimes," he said quietly, "the only way to protect something is to make everyone else believe it belongs to you. The realization washed over her slowly. He hadn't bought her. He had bought her freedom, but freedom came with risk. The town believed she was promised to him. If he sent her back, her father might sell her to someone else, someone cruel. So Caleb kept up the illusion. In public, he remained distant but respectful. In private, he placed books on the kitchen table at night. "You can read?" she asked once. "My wife could," he said softly. "She taught me. She taught me." He never spoke much about his late wife, but Eliza saw the grief in the way he touched the old photograph on the mantel. One evening, she found a folded paper on the table. It was a school application. In a town 3 hours away. Her hands shook as she held it. "You said you wanted school," Caleb said from the doorway. "It starts in autumn." Her eyes widened. "Up at the town, thinks you're my responsibility," he finished. "Which means no one will question where you go. You'd let me leave?" His voice was steady. "I'd make sure you do." "So you do." For the first time since that terrible afternoon on her porch, hope flickered in her chest. But hope, like drought-stricken land, is fragile, and the town had begun to whisper. Rumors grow faster than crops in fertile soil. By midsummer, the town had started to talk. Why was there no wedding? Has there no wedding? Why did Caleb Warren, once so solitary, now bring a young girl into town only for supplies and books? Why did she look educated? One afternoon at the general store, Mrs. Davenport leaned close to Eliza. "You must be grateful," the woman said, her smile tight. And most girls your age would consider themselves lucky. Eliza forced a nod. Lucky. That word burned worse than any insult. Outside, Caleb loaded flour sacks into the wagon. His movements were controlled, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. He heard the whispers, too. That night, a knock thundered on the ranch door. 3 men stood on the porch. Among them, her father. Eliza's heart nearly stopped. Her father's eyes darted inside the house. "Oh, where is she?" he demanded. "Upstairs," Caleb replied calmly. "You haven't married her." It wasn't a question. Caleb didn't answer. Her father stepped forward. "You think I don't hear things? People talk. You made a deal." "I kept it," Caleb said evenly. "You were to make her your wife." Caleb's jaw tightened. No, I was to keep her." The men exchanged glances. Her father's face reddened. "Ishi belongs with her husband." Eliza stepped onto the staircase then. "You don't belong to anyone," she said, her voice shaking but loud. Silence swallowed the room. Her father looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "You ungrateful child," he muttered. Caleb stepped between them. "Ishi's leaving in autumn," he said. "Leaving?" her father barked. "For school," the word exploded like gunfire. "A girl doesn't need school," one of the men snapped. Caleb's voice deepened. "She does. You'll ruin her," her father said. "No man will want her." Caleb's eyes flashed, sashed. "Then she'll learn to want more." The standoff felt endless. Finally, her father spat on the floor. "You've broken the agreement." No, Caleb replied quietly. "I redefined it." After they left, Eliza collapsed into a chair. "They'll come back," she whispered. "Yes," Caleb said. "Oh, why are you doing this?" she cried. "You owe me nothing." He hesitated. Then he spoke the truth he had carried for years. "When my wife was 13, she was promised to a man twice her age. She ran, found work, learned to read, built a life. I met her because she had choices." His voice trembled slightly. "She told me once that if no one had stepped in when she ran, she would have been forced back." Eliza's tears fell freely now. "I couldn't save her from illness," he continued. But I can save you from this." Summer faded into gold. The day before Eliza was to leave for school, the town gathered unexpectedly in front of the ranch. Whispers had turned into accusation. They demanded explanation. Caleb stood tall before them. "She is not my wife," he announced clearly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Ishi is a child," he continued, "and tomorrow she goes to school." Her father pushed forward. "You shame us." No," Caleb said, his voice ringing across the field. "We shame ourselves when we confuse ownership with protection." Silence fell heavy and thick. Then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Davenport stepped forward. "My sister was married at 14, she said quietly. She never learned to read." Another voice spoke. My daughter is 12." The tension began to shift. Not all minds changed that day, but enough did. Enough for the crowd to slowly disperse. Enough for Eliza to climb into the wagon the next morning without being dragged back. As the ranch faded behind her, she clutched her school papers tightly. "You'll write?" Caleb asked. "Every week," she promised. Years passed. Eliza did write letters filled with lessons learned, books read, dreams growing bigger than the plains. She became a teacher. Then, one day, she returned not as a bride, but as a woman standing tall beside the rancher who had once shielded her from the world. The town gathered again, this time not in accusation, but in quiet respect. Caleb, older now, thinner but still steady, watched as children ran across the fields, boys and girls carrying books. Eliza turned to him. "You didn't just save me," she said softly. "You changed this town." He shook his head gently. "No," he replied. "You did. I only gave you time." And as the sun dipped low over the prairie, the same wind that once carried her fear now carried something else. Possibility, because sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is refuse to let a child's future be sold. And sometimes love is not possession, it is protection. It is protection. If this story moved you, remember this: the world changes not only through grand gestures, but through quiet acts of courage. When one person decides that a child deserves more than survival, they deserve a future. Snug.